Now to New York City, where jury members are now deliberating in the federal sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs. So the judge gave the jury some pretty lengthy instructions in evaluating all the evidence that was presented them over the past 7 weeks, including graphic testimony from dozens of witnesses. So always a joy to bring in CBS News national correspondent and anchor Jericka Duncan, who's been following that story outside the pandemonium that is that trial, my friend. Jericka, can you go over the charges the jury has to look at? We understand that those instructions were very long and lengthy.
They are, and they're expected to be, because this is the most crucial part for the jurors. 8 men and 4 women that sat through about 2.5 hours worth of jury instructions and also a verdict sheet. So the charges that Combs is facing are the racketeering conspiracy, and within that there are 8 elements that the prosecution was expected to prove in reference to the fact that they say Combs led a criminal enterprise. Then there's the sex trafficking that has to do with his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura Fine. She was the star witness here, but there's also another sex trafficking count for Jane, who testified for 6 days. And then the last count that we're going to be looking at is that transportation for prostitution charge. So all in all, the racketeering conspiracy, he could face up to life in prison. That is the most serious one. So a lot of people looking to see what they will charge him with there, if they charge him with anything at all. The prosecution laying this case out very clearly when they made their closing arguments as to why the jurors should find him guilty of those charges. But the defense placing a lot of doubt in those closing arguments last week when it comes to this federal trial. Reed?
Jericka, remind us about how the process happens, because jurors are allowed to ask the judge questions and ask for pieces of evidence to be resent up to that jury room. If we see that happen, does it give us sort of a sense of what the jurors are thinking?
It does. I think when jurors ask for more evidence, or when they ask for clarification about how they're expected to reach a verdict and a specific charge, it gives us some indication that there's some discourse, maybe confusion about that specific charge. But, you know, the judge said that the jurors are the sole exclusive judges of the facts, and that they would have to rely on their recollection of that 7 weeks of witnesses that they've heard, as well as whether or not those witnesses are credible. I also want to note that the judge said that your verdict must be unanimous, but he said no juror should surrender his or her beliefs for the purpose of finding a unanimous verdict. So he's letting the jurors know that, listen, you need a unanimous verdict you need a unanimous group of jurors, those 12, in order to charge him with these crimes. But there may be an instance like we saw with Harvey Weinstein, where there sort of is a split verdict, where maybe they charge him on the sex trafficking, but they say not guilty on the racketeering conspiracy. So that is something also that could be an outcome. The family of Combs was in the courtroom today. They were in that second row. The first row is for the artist, but we saw 3 of his sons, 3 of his daughters. We know he has 7 children, and his mother, Janice Combs, was also there in the front. Combs was wearing a cream-colored shirt. He had his glasses on, his hands sort of clasped during the jury instructions, but we were also told he's requesting to have a book that he can read while he waits for the jurors to deliberate and find out what they find in terms of the facts of this case.
You've been in such close proximity to the arguments for so many weeks now, Jericka. As you have watched this play out, and it's really impossible to understand what the jurors are thinking, but what has been the reaction at various stages of the trial from jurors, just reading their body language?
Great question. You know, I was talking to a gentleman yesterday for a podcast that I'm doing, I Am That Reporter, shameless plug. But he told me, as a jury consultant, he doesn't necessarily look specifically just at reaction when the jurors are looking, but he's looking at their backgrounds when deciding how to pick jurors for whatever team that he's working for. So, you know, the judge, as well as both sides, were very careful in some of the questions that they asked to try and make sure that they do get this impartial jury that anybody would want if they have to stand before a federal trial, absolutely, in a case like this. But I did notice there were some jurors, to answer your question, that seemed to be a little bit more engaged at times than others, or had a reaction to me that looked like maybe they were questioning some of those witnesses that said that they were sexually assaulted or abused by Sean Combs. But again, you know, it comes down to hearing those last words from the judge to remind them that they are supposed to look at the letter of the law and apply what they've heard to the facts of the case, to the evidence, and be fair and impartial in their decision, as well as talking to the other jurors. I mean, that's what this process is about, them talking through this when they are stuck on whether or not to find someone guilty or innocent of a charge.
She is That Reporter on I Am That Reporter podcast and CBS News. Thank you so much, Jericka Duncan. Great to talk to you, my friend, as always.